everybody doing today? Good night, this evening. Everybody good? I want to thank everybody coming out with UNH. Tonight we have a very special guest, Ryan Turner. They're definitely an honor and a privilege to have Ryan come and read. I've definitely been a fan of his work for a few years now. So when I heard he was coming, I jumped at the opportunity to have him come to UNH. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody we have one more reading, November the 12th. Alumni Lounge, 6:30, Matthew Shinoda. So if anybody's interested, the next one will be at that time. Okay? All right. So let's get right to it. Ryan Turner is a soldier poet who served 7 years in the U.S. Army. He is the author of 2 poetry collections, Phantom Noise, 2010, and Hear Bullet, 2005, which won the 2005 Beatrice Holly Award, the New York Times Editor Choice Selection, the 2006 Penn Center USA Best in the West Award, and the 2007 Poets Prize, among others. Turner's poetry has been published in Poetry Daily, the Georgia Review, and other journals, and in Voices in Wartime, an anthology published in conjunction with the feature-length documentary film of the same name. In 2009, Turner was selected as one of the 50 United States Artist Fellows. Turner has also written a memoir, My Life as a Foreign Country, 2014, which retraces his war experiences. UNH, please let's give a warm welcome to Ryan Turner. Cell phone.
Oh, wait. No.
Oh,
Not just yet. Yeah.
Okay.
The 107s have a crackling sound of fire and electricity, of air-ruckled heat. And when they pinwheel over the rooftops of Haman al-Alil, they just keep going, traveling for years over the horizon to land in the meridians of Divisadero Street, where I'm standing early one morning on the Memorial Day in Fresno, California. The Veterans Parade scattering at the impact. Mothers shielding their children by instinct. Old war vets crouching behind automobiles as police set up an outer cordon for the unexploded ordnance. Rockets often fall in the night sky of the skull. Down long avenues of the brain's myelin sheathing, over synapses and the rough structures of thought, they fall into the hippocampus, into the seat of memory, where lovers and strangers and old friends entertain themselves, unaware of the dangers headed their way, or that I will need to search among them the way the bomb disposal tech walks tethered and alone down Divisadero Street, suited up as if walking on the surface of the moon, as a crowd watches just how determined he is to dismantle death, to take it apart piece by piece, the bravest thing I've ever seen. So I wrote this poem when I was in Iraq, right? Kind of strange. What's your name in the back there? You got kind of a maroon colored shirt on?
Vince?
Yeah, Vince?
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird poem, isn't it? You know? It starts off, I'm in Iraq, 2003, 2004. And it says, the 107s have a crackling sound. Fortunately, these Katyusha rockets, that's the name of the poem. Katyusha, there were once or twice I heard them when I was in country. They're notoriously inaccurate, and thankfully they were when I was there. We called it a significant emotional event. Sorry, I've already failed in my task here. So. But it says the 107s have a crackling sound of fire as they go to the rooftops of this city, Haman al-Alil, southeast of Mosul, and they just keep going, traveling for years and learning to land in Fresno, and to land here. But there's a lot of veterans. I remember watching at the end of the poem, it talks about seeing this bomb disposal tech walking tethered and alone down the street, right? I remember seeing him in a Mosul street, Mosul now under IS control, right? City of about 1.7 million people. The river, Tigris River goes through it. There's like a bad side of town. There's a university district. There's the whole downtown. There's a big park in the center, so like a Central Park kind of park, where the ruins of Nineveh are. That's why they keep it, preserve it, because that's where like Gilgamesh, where the oral tradition, where we told stories as human beings before written language was captured by stone clay tablet or papyrus roll. that was the soil that it comes from, so they preserved it as a city park. And I watched this guy walk down the road, and there was another guy unspooling him on this tether that was tied to his uniform. Do you guys know why he was tied to that as he walked out towards the bomb? Right, yeah. Well, you know the deal, so yeah. For those of you who haven't been in uniform, it's because there might be secondary bombs out there, because they know if one blows up and he gets hurt, we're going to go run and help him. So they might have secondary explosions waiting for those who might render aid. So the rope is there to pull them back, try to do what you can to help them. But of course, the poem's not really about that. The poem's about this explosive material inside of waves of veterans coming home and their families too. And like, how can we help them take apart the explosive material inside of them as in the years to come and the decades to come, as they reintegrate and find a way from their warrior self into whoever they might be afterwards. When I had 4 months left in the military, I remember my squad leader saying, he was like, "Hey Turner, just show up for PT in the morning for a physical exercise," which you could tell I had not done in a while. He said, "Just show up for PT in the mornings, and then once I know you're still breathing, you're good to go, then go out and figure out who Brian is going to be." And that's really stuck with me, the idea of who is Brian. I've been Sergeant Turner for 7 years, 1 month, 29 days. I know exactly. In a few hours, I've captivated it all. I'll read some poems tonight, maybe a short portion of the memoir, maybe for Josh especially, right? Something we can talk about afterwards if you want. And I'm happy to talk with all of you afterwards. The reason I said not the phone to turn off necessarily, I'll give you my phone number, all right? You guys ready? I saw you had your phone out, man. What's your name? You got a blue shirt on? Sean? Yeah. Yeah, I saw you were jamming, talking to somebody, enjoying a conversation. While you're with your phone on, if you can, maybe you can be like, "Well, that poem sucks," or "That was a little better than the last one." You keep trying, or whatever, whatever it might be. The numbers, I'll say it a couple times: 407-864-2586. Okay? So 407-864-2586. If you don't remember, you can ask somebody next to you or something. And because maybe there's a poem that son of a bitch, I'm going to type or something. But I'm going to turn mine off. What I'll try to do is, I, like you, I have a very busy life, and I'll try my best in the next 24 hours to respond to any text that might come to me. But after that, I would ask that you not text me, just for something about the night or something, the reading or whatever. Just because I got to kind of keep my life so it makes sense, and I can be as close to the word now as possible, And but the reason I do this in part is not only to keep us having a conversation and make this something that's all of us are participating in, but also because it's laying the seed. Because surely you lose the number as you go along. Like years from now, 5, 10 years from now, if you have some kind of project that might help Iraq or Afghan veterans or veterans and their families as they make their way home, or in their communities. If it's something I can help with, you can always contact me through the publishers, and they'll forward it on to me. And if it's some project that I can help you with, or I'll be a part of, I'll roll up my sleeves and do what I can to help out. And I'd be very interested if you had projects that might help, say, Afghan people or Iraqi people who may be among some of the newest of Americans. Like helping them find a way into this country. And I come from an Irish background for the most part, so I know when my folks during the famine came over and got off the boats, it wasn't like, "Hey, welcome, come on in, let's help you out, man. We want to get you started." It ain't quite like that, But maybe we can evolve. Maybe we can get better and do this better, and help the next generations as they come. So I'll read a poem. Can I read somebody else's poem? Is that all right? This is a poem from Yehuda Amichai. And for me, this poem is just a brilliant poem. See what you think. It's called "The Diameter of the Bomb." You guys know this one? Cool. All right. So if I suck at reading this, don't stop from reading it. It's called "The Diameter of the Bomb." The diameter of the bomb was 30 centimeters, and the diameter of its effective range about 7 meters, with 4 dead and 11 wounded. And around these, in a larger circle of pain and time, 2 hospitals are scattered and 1 graveyard. But the young woman, who was buried in the city she came from, at a distance of more than 100 kilometers, enlarges the circle considerably. And the solitary man mourning her death on the distant shores of a country far across the sea includes the entire world in a circle. And I won't even mention the howling orphans. Rises up to the throne of God and beyond, making a circle with no end and no God. Very powerful. Tonight I'm mostly talking about war and conflict, but I think you could substitute in the diameter of the bomb. You could say the diameter of the car crash. You could say the diameter of the divorce. You could substitute a lot of things and find a way that, things happen in our lives that are difficult to live with and to carry forward, and they have ripple effects and repercussions that carry into the future. So, for example, with me, how do I figure out how to carry the experiences that I had in combat or in uniform and integrate them as I become Brian with the rest of my life in a healthy way that might be useful for me and maybe for other people? I just shared that. I don't have an answer to that. I'm just figuring that out. I think that's what life is, right? Partially. Josh, you asked me to read this poem, so I'll read this now. It's called Eulogy. It happens on a Monday at 11:20 a.m. as tower guards eat sandwiches and seagulls drift by on the Tigris River. Prisoners tilt their heads to the west with burlap sacks and duct tape blindly. The sound reverberates down concertina coils the way piano wire thrums when given slack, and it happens like this. On a blue day of sun, when Private Miller pulls the trigger to take brass and fire into his mouth. The sound lifts the birds up off the water. A mongoose pauses under the orange trees. And nothing can stop it now, no matter what blur of motion surrounds him, no matter what voices crackle over the radio in static confusion, because if only for this moment the earth is still, and Private Miller has found what low hush there is, down in the eucalyptus shade, there by the river. So I remember he was, I think he was 23, he was in second squad Bravo team. He was a saw gunner, like automatic weapon kind of thing. And he went into a portalette. He used to listen to rock music, and he played handheld video games and stuff. And I remember the week before he committed suicide, sometime about a week before, I remember being in a vehicle. For some reason, this didn't often happen. The second squad was inside our vehicle. His squad leader was there, and he was up against a radio hatch, which was always the best. The radio, actually, not the radio hatch, but the radio, because there was a heating vent there, and it's also like a perfect time. Good job. Thanks for coming, and thanks for being brave to come into the room, because it's difficult to do that. Good for you. Good for you. I would have been too shy. I was like, this guy's probably going to say a bunch of stuff, and how do I walk past him? So you got past all that. So I was talking about Private Miller, who had committed suicide while I was there, and he was near the vehicle, near the radio, which was the best part, because you'd sit there, and the heating vent was there, and you kind of rack out right up against this sort of grill, but that was real comfortable. Compared for metal, it was comfortable. And I remember he was sleeping, and most of the guys were all racked out. When you see vehicles going through the streets and stuff, it looks all high speed, like soldiers. Know inside that they're either like watching porn or farting and talking about fart jokes. 90, that's like 10% time, but 90% time, they'll sleep on each other's shoulders, waiting when the ramp goes down. Okay, what's going on? Because that's how it is in the army. They can't speak to other branches. But I said to his squad leader, a guy from Wisconsin, I said, man, I was looking over at Miller and I said, well, he's a good guy, man. He's a real good guy. Just a quiet moment. And he looked down and he said, yeah, he's a really good guy. So it was, which is the highest compliment. And you guys have your phones out. Let's do some math real quick. Got a poetry reading, can we do that? Somebody get your phone out. Anybody got a calculator on them?
I got it.
Yeah, you got it? You ready for some numbers? Who said that? Who's ready for some numbers? Okay. Because the average, does anybody know what the average number of suicides among, this is only, not the whole, all veterans from all the wars and all military service, just from Iraq and Afghan wars put together, the average rate per day.
It's 22.
22. 22. Sometimes it's fluctuated to 18, right? So let's,
Good days.
just for numbers, let's just go for the lower number. You know? Let's go with 18. So 18, how many days there's in a year? 365, right? So what number do you get for a year?
6,570.
6,570. So let's not go all the way back to, like, say, 2001 and 2003 when Afghanistan and Iraq started. Let's just say, let's go back to 2010, 11, 12, 13. Let's count this whole year because we didn't count the years before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So times 5. What's that?
32,850.
How much?
32,850.
How many people live in your hometowns? My hometown had 13,000 when I was a kid. It's ballooned at like 60,000 now. We had 13,000 before. You'd have to double it and, you subtract a few. You know? 13,000. How many people are in the school?
65,000.
65,000.
1,600.
Sorry,
100?
25 to 6,000.
About 6,000.
That's ambitious.
So if everybody just instantly disappeared from here, we'd have to go to more campuses and find more. You know? But when we see 18, it's like, oh, that's a lot. I think, I come here today, 18. When I leave tomorrow, another 18. And by the next day, my platoon is gone. I'm already working on towards the company. We have a lot of work to do in this country. So when I say there's people that have explosive material, it's like a real thing. Right? Real people out there who are struggling. And how do we find actual ways to communicate with them, find ways to help them come back? I've heard that there are some nations and tribes, like say, for example, the Vietnamese way back in the day, centuries back, that when the warriors went out to fight, when they come back, they had to stop short of the village. They couldn't come back and go. The villagers would go out to meet them first. And they would, there was a ceremony they did. They would have them stripped down, they'd wash them, ceremonially wash them of the blood that they had on their bodies. And then they would take away the warrior name and give them back their name. And once they had done that, then they would bring them back into the village. And I think it's important because the veterans that come back, they sort of come back and they assimilate back in. But our larger culture is not assimilating with them as they come back. We are not going out to meet them and to help and to be a part of the process, recognizing the warrior and the blood itself. Well, and my point is that, the wars that we wage, we are connected to as a larger community. And I'm going to read a couple more poems real quick, but can I ask you, what year were you born in? Yeah.
96.
96. You were in 95? 94? 93? Whoa, okay. 92? 91? All right.
That's right.
So I would say, if you were born 1991 or afterwards, you probably thought about this before, right? You've never done something as simple as this one act. I don't think you've ever done that, not once in your entire life, in a time that this country was not at war. And you don't even have to think about it if you don't want to. You're the brave soul. You should grab some cookies on the way. Yeah. Did you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was 2001, and that's still basically over. They just said a couple days ago the Marines are finished. War's over. In Iraq, we're bombing people. It's near dawn or after dawn now in Iraq, and there's surely, people, Americans with the flag on their shoulders searching out in the hunt for people's souls right now on our behalf, or your behalf. And but if we go backwards, it may seem like around 2001, like there's a gap going back to 1991 with the first Gulf War. That's because we call them sanctions. There were sanctions in Iraq, right? And it's a sterile sounding. What is a sanction? Well, let's imagine if in Connecticut there were Iraqi jets flying over every day, right? And every now and then they bomb what they call an installation. We might call it a building. And inside the building they might be eliminating enemy targets. We might call them our brothers or family members or loved ones. So what we call a sanction, somebody else might call a war. Maybe a low-level war, not some big giant war. But they might call it a war, you know? So that's why I said I don't think you've taken a breath in your life in a country that wasn't at war. You don't even have to think about it. How wealthy are we? You could wage war and not even have to think about that. I'm not sure about the word wealth in that sentence. So, read a poem, right? I'm supposed to
You're fine.
Okay, all right. This poem, this is called Insignia. And for those of you who haven't been in the military, on certain uniforms, 3 stripes is a sergeant, and a rocker of yellow hung below is a staff sergeant. So it's called Insignia. So it started from something remarkable I heard a news reporter say when she said that 1 in 3 female soldiers will experience sexual assault while serving in the military. 1 in 3. So it made me want to, and then I went to the VA hospital in Palo Alto, in California, and this story is a very loose sort of, it's derived from experience. She hides under a deuce and half this time, sleeping on a roll of foam, draped in mosquito netting. Sandflies hover throughout the night. She sleeps under vehicle exhaust and heat, dreaming of mortars buried beside her, 3 stripes painted on each cold tube, a rocker of yellow hung below. It's you she's dreaming of, Sergeant. She'll dream of you for years to come if she makes it out of this country alive, which she probably will. You will be the fire and the hovering breath, not the sniper, not the bomber on the streets, you. So I'm here to ask for this one night's reprieve. Let her sleep tonight. Let her sleep. Pause a moment when they give us moon. Smoke. The gin your wife sent from New Jersey, colored mint green with food dye disguised in a bottle of mouthwash. Take a long swig of it. Take the edge out of your knuckles. Let it blur your vision into a tremor of lights. The explosions in the distance are not your own. In these long hours before dawn on the banks of the Tigris River, let her sleep. In her dream, your eyes are pools of rifle oil. You unsheathe the bayonet from its scabbard while she waits. On a mattress of sand and foam, there in motor pool, she waits to kiss bullets into your mouth. Some ugly things in this world. There's some disturbed people among us that we need to help or at least push away. And so, I think about uniform. My sister, for example, if she had gone in, she didn't go into service, but if she had been uniformed and she'd gone to Afghanistan, Iraq, for example, there are people actively trying to kill her. And yet, back on the bases, this is what I found is primarily the sexual predators in uniform were mostly in the sergeant's ranks. And I was a sergeant, and it just goes against everything I was trained, because a sergeant, your number one job is to take care of your soldiers. And it seems to go exactly the opposite of that, to be preying on them. So much so that someone like the basic part of the story that's based on fact here is that there was one person that I know of who she would go out in the motor pool and try to find different vehicles to sleep under and hide so that this guy couldn't find her. In a place where the enemy, whoever that is, right? Who's the enemy in that point? Is trying to kill her with mortars. I read that poem at all 4 service academies: Annapolis, West Point, Air Force Academy, Connecticut, New London. I was there a couple weeks ago at the Coast Guard Academy. But I say it here too because I think on a college campus we all have to watch out for each other. Take care of each other. Make sure at nighttime you go in pairs and stuff. Just to, it shouldn't be like that. It's the world we live in. So find ways to help each other to be safe until you can study and follow the dreams that you hope this space might afford you. You work hard for. Okay, preaching. You get one of these things sometimes, man, you just want to start preaching. My great-grandfather's a preacher, and it's somehow come down in the DNA. You got to be careful. You'll hear it in his next poem, because this is called Sleeping in Dick Cheney's Bed. Which I've done. I've slept in his actual bed, the bed he slept in. I was at the Air Force Academy, and I found out that he'd been in, for some reason, when I went to this lodge, they had normally the lodge has a bunch of rooms and stuff, but at that particular time, there was nobody of any repute or something. Normally you go like a senator or a general or some high up person. They must have went down the list till they got to like poet, an army guy too. It was the Air Force, so like well, put him in there. And as I wheeled in, it was a massive sort of suite, right? It had a kitchen, it had a living room with a big giant L-shaped leather couch, and had a glass like table with a Dale Chihuly glass feature, massive art piece there, right? And a wet bar along the wall that was literally as long as those two gray curtain things right there. It was that long, stocked fully, right? Just one guy. Like I don't do that much, And then there's an office over here that looks like a kind of presidential suite with leather-back chairs you can look at in Colorado. And then there's the room that I'm most concerned about because we own and stuff here, the bed. I told him I'd write this poem, so. It's unnerving how comfortable this is. NORAD watching over the bedroom. Colorado mule deer chewing the dawn outside. As I dream, I'm wading thigh-high into the North Platte River, wearing rubber waders, casting a handmade fly with a whip-like graceful sling of the line until I fall back. Plunge into the cold, rushing white water. My eyes blurred hard under the sun's interrogations. Cheney's hands like a preacher's delivering me deeper into the truth with a gasp of air, a flash of light, to be plunged back down where he offers midges and bloodworms and rusty scuds to the cloudy river, running 1,400 cubic feet per second, until I cough up the fictional and beg for the heartland's fluid clarity, salvation, the charity of forgiveness, anything to unravel the dream and return me back to my California bed. My lover beside me, and not the stale man's breath clinging to the Egyptian cotton sheets, the hanging curtains, the flaring light of Colorado Springs where Cheney slept in this very bed, both of us held by the same coiling box spring, goose-down pillows cupping our heads gently into sleep, the reddening glow of Mars rising over the horizon, dead skin sloughed off at an invisible level to coat my own. And still, what does it say about me? That the Pinot Grigio tasted so good on my tongue, and that I struggled to get a sergeant's tonight, speaking to the officer corps in a theater filled with 1,600 listening faces as I spoke about rape, death, and murder. What does it say about me? That I can return to Cheney's room after midnight, strip my clothes off and curl in the bed where he too has slept. The sheets, the sublime reprieve from my tired frame. The night, the perfection of sin. What does it say about us all? Is Guantanamo a concept, or is it a real place? Are we a nation of torturers? What bed do we sleep in? Would you want to go to a prison and never be charged with a crime? Not even charged with a crime? You never know when you might be let go? No. Is that the United States of America? Is that your country? Is this your country? Or do we just wait for somebody to do something about it? Those people who do stuff, they'll do it, I'm taking classes, man. You know what I mean? You're busy, man. You gotta put bread on the table. You gotta eat. You got classes. You gotta think in 5 minutes. You gotta do it. Texting your friends because you can't be with them all the time. You do what you can. Be friends with them, right? Keep up with them. But there are people in cells in Guantanamo right now, and they have not been charged with a crime. So, what will you do? I'd like to, if you don't mind, I think in the interest of time and stuff like that, there's a dear poet who passed away today, a wonderful poet. One of my mentors, although I never met him, he died today. His name is Galway Connell. Did you know he passed away today?
No, I
just saw it today, yeah. So I'm sorry to give you bad news.
I'm trying to go do it, man.
Yeah, and I think I'll read one of his poems, just so we can hear his words out loud, and as he goes off into the great, wherever people go. After making love, we hear footsteps. For I can snore like a bullhorn, or play loud music, or sit up talking with any reasonably sober Irishman, and Fergus will only sink deeper in his dreamless sleep, which goes by all in one flesh. But let there be that heavy breathing, or a stifled come cry anywhere in the house, and he will wrench himself awake and make for it on the run, as now we lie together after making love, a quiet touching along the length of our bodies, familiar touch of the long married, and he appears. It is baseball pajamas. It happens. The neck opening so small he has to screw them on, and flops down between us and hugs us and snuggles himself to sleep, his face gleaming with satisfaction at being this very child. In the half-darkness, we look at each other and smile and touch arms across this little, startlingly muscled body, this one whom habit of memory propels to the ground of his making, sleeper only the mortal sounds can seem awake. This blessing love gives us again into our arms. A bright soul for Galway. I encourage you to read. He's got an amazing book that I return to oftentimes called The Book of Nightmares. That's a phenomenal book. If you get a chance, it's a very quick read. You can read like an hour, or quicker, but I mean, just spend time with it. So I think I'll read two more poems. This is a two-poem morning, as what poets will say, and then maybe we can ask some questions or have a larger conversation. My wife and I went to Japan in 2012 and for the summer. We lived in Kyoto, but of course the earthquake had happened the year before. And I started hearing stories about, I read this one particular story that said that some of the dead, if they wore tennis shoes, sometimes they would float upside down. I don't know, there's something about that image. There's certain, for the writers in the audience, there's sometimes a one key detail. And if you just keep following that detail, you'd be surprised where it leads you. For me, that detail led me to this poem. It's called After the Tohoku Earthquake of 2011. Given a year adrift on the cold Pacific, the broken cities arrive crushed, splintered, with all that the water upended and carried out to sea, all that we might gather from the waves washing into the ice plant dunes along the California coast. So too the dead, who float upside down in the silent wreckage. Strollers, refrigerators, musical instruments, each day more of it rolling in. Freight cars and gurneys, window frames, suitcases, bowling pins. And among the ruined houses, the soft panels of wood where light once crossed the rooms where people lived, spooning soup from a bowl perhaps, or brushing the hard tangles from someone's hair. The ocean brings it all in, wave after wave, while out beyond the breakers, Mrs. Nakahara drifts in a field of debris. She's walked these many months with the moonlight at her feet, listening to the whales as they sound their requiem over the canyons of the deep. Mrs. Nakahara has crossed the ocean to whisper what she's learned from the rack and foam, from the chambered bodies who navigate the dark fathoms, from the blind searchers who take in the gifts of the dead, one after another, a tenderness that is cold and unrecognizable to the world above. Do you guys know anybody in Japan? Yeah. I hope you get a chance to go there someday. It's an amazing country, beautiful people. My grandfather fought against them in World War II. He killed a man with a machete on Bougainville, in the thick brush, And then later, as they were preparing to go to Iwo Jima, they dropped the Marines off on this little atoll, Anahuac Atoll. And you could see some of the scuttled Japanese tanks that still had dead men inside of them. And then, a generation later, my father actually was stationed for a short time as a Russian linguist fighting against the Russians in the Cold War. They would fly sometimes out of Anahuac. And he went snorkeling and he saw those same tanks down underwater, still there, the cemetery of the dead. And then a generation later, and I should say my dad also was stationed in Yokohama, south of Tokyo. Don't tell my mom, but he fell in love with a Japanese girl and they kind of had a thing going for a while. We don't talk about it too much, so there was a love developing for Japan, and then in 2012, my wife and I went there and stayed for 3 months, so I guess what I'm saying is, are we going to wait 3 generations before we go to Baghdad and go to the zoo, or go down Mutanabi Street and talk to the booksellers and talk about poetry and things like that with them? Are we going to let other generations do that for us? Or do we try to, you don't even have to go to Iraq. I'm going to read one more poem But I'll say this, there was a guy I met in 2012, the same year I went to Baghdad later in the year, as a journalist for National Geographic. I wrote an essay you do not need to read. It's not very good. I'm not being humble. It's not very good, you know? But I sat down with this guy named Sadek Mohammed. He's a very big guy. And he was speaking to me in English about T.S. Eliot and Edith Sitwell, these poets that came in through, when the British were there from 1918 to about 1925 in the north, they called it a protectorate. Sounds like sanctions, you know? But they had soldiers on the ground, right? And they also, an English citizen went to Baghdad and opened a bookstore on Watanabe Street, the bookseller street. And Eliot and Sitwell, their work went into the salon culture of the day and was part of what influenced the free verse movement in the Arabic world, changing centuries of Arabic verse and into this new type of poetry. So for the writers out there, hopefully that's interesting. But for all of us, the reason he was telling me this was the point was, he was saying, you know, when the British came here back in the day, they came with the boots and guns and all that, but there was the other part, like the human part, talking about art and literature and the human soul. And you guys have come with your tanks and helicopters and all that, but where's the other part? And you do not have to learn Arabic to be able to talk to folks like this. I'll give you just one snippet of the conversation. This is what he said to me in one part. This is a direct quote, big guy, right? He said, well, Elliot, well, where is the objective correlative? I ask you. Like, what the heck is it? Do you guys know what the objective correlative is? So I'm saying, you don't have to learn Arabic. I'm going to go there, I said it like, hey, wait a minute, hold on, what's the objective correlative? I'm going to tell you. Yeah? So, he's waiting for the conversation. They are waiting for the conversation. I am the microphone for his conversation to you to say, where's the other part? What will you do about that? So, one last poem. And I don't know, where is Nantucket from here? Is anyone nearby? My geography is poor. Does anybody know? Is Nantucket anywhere close or is it very far away? Close-ish, right? But the whaling industry wasn't too far off, right? Yeah, okay. So this starts off with the Essex, a whaling ship, you know? And for sailors out there, just so you know, sidelights, a sailing ship would carry 2 of these between sunset and sunrise, 1 green to starboard, 1 red to port. And that comes up at the end of the poem. It's called Circumnavigating the Globe. And because I may never see you again, you never know how these things work. You know? I might go outside and get hit by a bread truck, dead. You know, oh, dead. Died the same day as Galway Canal. It's up. You don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. Or maybe I'll see you down in Orlando and we'll go to Disney World. No, that won't happen. But maybe I'll see you in Orlando. But we're not taking you to Disney World. So, this is kind of a goodbye poem. It's called Circumnavigating the Globe. In 1819, she held the scrimshaw carving from a whale's tooth as the Essex pulled anchor and set out from Nantucket, her lover on the foot ropes leading to the crow's nest, waving goodbye. He would never be seen alive again, something she somehow knew, her hands trembling with what love can do within us, only beginning to learn what it can do as years pass by. She said, I love you, just as the Essex disappeared from sight, and the words carried on the wind, and the earth's turning, rising and falling in a duet with the ocean's blue waters. Her words rose in thermal updrafts. They fell with the rain, wandering through long decades, the streets of Tangier, Port Moresby, Panama City, to round the Cape of Good Hope, Drake's Passage. Her own skeleton long underground, and yet her words continue on through the apple orchards, the gold sway of wheat on the prairie, Indian summer grass rusting into another autumn in New England, where they finally discover an old man on his deathbed, late in the 20th century, dying in a hospital where no one gives a damn, and he knows it, knowing also that he deserves nothing more. And yet, these words, he hears them in the breeze at the window, the curtains lifting and falling as they near, and they pass right by him, a sweet thing that, even if they were never meant for him, here they are, called out over the sea, one voice of the eternal, love, even as it escapes us, even as we set sail with the sidelights on, red to port, green to starboard, never to return. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Give a little round of applause for Brian.
So,
before we get up out of here, I want to spend about 5-10 minutes question and answer. Someone had any questions for Mr. Chairman? I know my class might have a question or two. I'm quite sure there's a couple of other people that have questions, right?
Some heckling.
Ms. Perkins.
Could you talk a little bit about the poem that you wrote? I'm forgetting if it was 200 or 2,000 pounds.
2,000 pounds.
2,000 pounds, which I found out later with an investigation was 800 pounds of ammonium nitrate, but it was already published, so I don't know. So there's a disclaimer, you know. But yeah,
Yeah,
is there
just
specifically, if you want to
just
talk
the
about
kind
it?
of, where did that come from? If that was like an experience or just more from being in the...
We went over the point. I think they
Yeah.
were really interested in the points, the different points that you got, you know,
Yeah.
from the point of definition.
Right. This is an interesting question because I believe that art finishes in the reader. Art finishes in the. We should give them a really bad time and push out or something. Make it awkward. No. So I guess my first question would be, how does it finish to you? What do you think? I know this seems coy, but this is a very serious thing for me about art. Were they true? Did they happen? Or did they not happen?
Not necessarily like the truth to it, but just the perspectives that you provide, because I mean you can't, or maybe you can, be all of them. You know, that was kind of where I was going.
I get you.
Yeah.
Okay. I just, I really do believe the art finishes in the reader, and that's part of the great, the wonderful part of having a dialogue with someone who reads it, other than my mom and dad and some close friends, because I foisted stuff on them for years, you know, and they've read the 7 books that weren't published before this one, you know. So what I would say is it's not nebula, what's the right word for this? If you look at a poem and you come to a certain conclusion, as long as you can look to the text and say, here is why I say X, you may discover things that the writer themselves maybe didn't intend or didn't see or recognize or learn themselves from their own poem, you know. Because the poem will teach us all, you know, if there's enough work going on inside of it, if there's enough water to draw from the well, you know. What I mean now, like when you go to a movie and you walk out and you start talking about things, you start using concept words like, oh, that movie is about oppression or whatever it might be. When they never use that word once in the movie, right? You're just in the landscape of the world of that movie. And then you go back and watch the movie again, and you see stuff you didn't see the first time, and then again and again. It keeps drawing water from the well. You know what I mean? So, but to get to your question, I was really I thought traffic circles are very common. They're not so common here in the States, but they're very common in large cities in Iraq, for example. And so the traffic circle is it's similar to the diameter of the bomb, right? It's sort of an inclusive place, because there were many different incidences, moments that took place with different roadside bombs and vehicle-borne IDs, where someone drove up and blew themselves up, or, you know, I could have picked any number of those to sort of focus on, but I wanted one that was, I thought, like, artistically, I wanted one that was in a space that included a wide range of people. It's always the problem of inclusion, because inclusion, you know, immediately creates exclusion. There's so many voices that aren't included in that poem. You know, so that was one of the problems I have with that poem. I'm drifting from the initial question, but hopefully it's useful. But in the larger book, if you read the book as a whole, what you'll find is there are a series of poems, and they're called OP, which means observation post. Observation post, or OP 71, 798, you know, that kind of thing. But where's like OP 73, 74, or 67? Where's OP 892? You know, it's a nod, what we call a nod to the reader. You know, sometimes we have them inside the language, and sometimes they're in the silent spaces between poems or between things, the unsaid. And either way, whether it's in the language or in the unsaid, writers often, especially poets, often have what we call a nod to the reader, where part of the reader's work is to figure out, to say, oh, wait a minute, why did they have this series of poems, for example, these certain numbers, but they don't have the other numbers? Maybe it's a nod to say it's a very small, incomplete book, and there are millions of other stories that need to be included. You know? It's incapable, it's something impossible for me to do, but I can recognize it. You know? So, and I think it's crucial to try to step in the shoes of others and see. And I think it's just human nature. I don't think it's so odd, you know, because when you're just as you're going through a city, you wonder, like, what's life like for that person? What's life for, You know, when you're walking down the street, you sometimes think that. You know? My wife and I sometimes, we like to sit at, I'm sure you guys have done this, right? You know, we'll sit like at a cafe or a coffee shop or something, and people will play that game of like, okay, make up a story about that person. And you walk by and like, oh yeah, he's a computer scientist, and he's trying to work on his algorithm late at night. He's like at 4 or 5 in the morning. This is a rare day where he woke up early because he thought maybe it would change his thinking, and today it would disrupt his thinking so he could unlock that problem and get the algorithm, you know. But his girlfriend left him last week, so we'll start, you know, we're trying to get a sense of it. But a much more empathetic move might be like going down the road and I'd see an old man in a wheelchair who looks like he's been around for a while. He's been in a wheelchair for a while, and it's Baghdad. And he looks like he was there when the Iran-Iraq war happened, when 1 million people died fighting against the Iranians. And we supplied weapons to Donald Rumsfeld. This is not news. I don't know if you guys saw the news recently. They're like, oh, can you believe it? They had a weapons program that was supplied by the Americans, and they found some of the old weapons and stuff. And there's a photograph of Rumsfeld shaking hands with. I knew that before we ever went into the war in 2003. This is not news. But everyone's acting like it's news suddenly, you know? It's like the reporters themselves are not educated to recognize that the story that they're reporting on has already been done. All they have to do is say, oh, they found evidence of the story that was ours. You know what I mean? So we have to do our own research. When I say stuff, don't believe me for it. You know, look it up. Like let me ask you a couple, if you guys don't mind. What is your image, if you had one picture, you know, for you, reminds you of the Iraq War in your mind? What is there one photograph or one image, central image, that for you is the central image of the Iraq War? What is it? What might it be? Yeah.
There's the top limb of Saddam Hussein's statue.
Wait, with those ropes and stuff, and the statue coming down? Okay, that's one. What do you think? What if if we're going to put ourselves in other people's shoes? If we were all Iraqis right now, if it wasn't that one, maybe another image, what would the image be that they remember as the central image of the American presence in Iraq? Do you think it's the top limb of the statue, or is it something else? That's a trick. I'm a teacher, so you can hear the trick question in my voice. But do you know where it leads? Do you have that image? Or have we lost it? Or did we never have it? There's a man. He's standing on a box. He cannot see us. We can see him. You can see him. He's standing right here in front of you. He's higher. He's not a tall man. He's wearing a black robe. His arms are out to the side. And there are wires from his fingertips. Do you know this photo? How many of you don't know the photo? Please be honest. You need to know this photo. It's from Abu Ghraib. It's from the prison where the torture and the scandal came to light when I was still in Iraq from 2003 to 2004. Look up Abu Ghraib, man on the box. That's all you got to Google. It'll pop up. You'll see the photo that Iraqis often think of as the central image of the war, the American presence in this particular war. You know? So when I would drive around the streets, I remember right after that came to light, which I'm glad it did. It needed to come to light. I'm glad it wasn't suppressed and find out 20 years from now. You know what I mean? Although it made it harder for us on the ground. I could see the sea change on people's faces when that came out. I remember going around a traffic circle, right, similar kind of place, and there was an old man there with a white beard and white hair. He was sitting on the curb waiting for someone to pick him up or something. And I was up in the back hatch. And I was an infantry guy, I had my weapon there, and I'm at what we call name tape defilade. My hand on my hand on the weapon, waving with my non-firing hand. No, I wasn't waving that day. I just had my hand on my weapon, and I'm just looking. But I'm high up, and I have a helmet and black glasses on that are dark, so you can't see where I'm looking. And I don't move my face to look so he can see that I'm looking at it. You know what I mean? I'm just scanning my sector, looking at where we're going. But I'm looking at him. He's right over here, down here. I'm kind of looking at him. As we get closer, I see him. And he's looking at me specifically. And he just has, I'm not an actor, but he's just like, I read it as like just deep disappointment. You know, for what it's worth. You'll never find that in the history book. You won't find that in the news. You know, it's not a soundbite. It's like the real world. You know. You have to, I would say you have to read it. This is the last thing I'll say, because I know many of you are being very patient. Some of you just have to go to the bathroom. If you're in the bathroom, I'd be like, this guy, shut him, I gotta go to the bathroom. I got enough in my head now. But when you read the news, what the journalists do, I love journalism, and I'm a hack journalist myself. I love the process of it. We need to know what happened in that village today. It's useful for us to know. We're connected to it. We paid for the bombs that landed on the village, you know, for example. But when the journalist says that 5 people died and 17 are wounded, there isn't a, here's the number 5, right? Is that this? Well, what's her name? Brandon, Kelly,
Sally.
Allie, Eric, and
Austin.
Austin. Okay? Any of you have brothers or sisters?
Yeah.
They're not in the number. Wait a minute, actually, none of you are in the number. You're all smashed into the number 5. None of your names are gone, erased. You're now number 5. You are number 5. The entire world that each of you carry with you, your whole lifetimes, all the things you love, the things you don't like, your experiences, all of that is compressed down into this number 5. It's an abstraction. When we read it, flip over to the next page, oh yeah, another one of those bombing things. We have to read with our humanity as well as the cerebellum into the news that and we need to engage it and recognize what are we really talking about when we take in information. What's happening in the world and how are we connected to it? And do we want to be connected to that? So it leads to the question, are you going to walk out into the world and have a democracy and be a part of it? And add your voice to wherever you stand on these things? You know, I personally, I'm for the freedom of, you know, whatever you believe, but believe it in a vocal way, because it's quiet in America right now. I go to colleges all the time, all across the nation, and I hear just crickets. So I know you're tired. I know you're working hard. I can see it on your faces, many, you know. But if you have some leisure time, if you have a moment, or you can do it for one day, a month, or something, find some way to get out and find some problem in the world that you think you can add one small bit of work towards. You can lift a shovel and carry something. You can carry a load off somebody else's back. Do it for a day, you know? But we got to get out in the world and do some work. There's a lot to do, and nobody else is going to do it, you know? So I wish you well in that process. You may lose the number. You can always contact me through the publisher. They'll forward the email on to me. I'll roll up my sleeves and I'll do what I can to help you with your project. But do something. Thank you very much.